Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webcast of The Office, Reimagining and Reestablishing the Workplace in the Wake of COVID-19. This is the first in a series of webinars that we're calling the Pivot Plan, and it's sponsored by Santa Massimo Davis, LLP. As some of the folks on the line may know, we've done a series of webinars before today that focus on all of the legal issues and personnel issues that surround COVID-19 as it related to executive orders and shutdowns and managing business through the crisis. While many of those issues are still in front of us and still on our desks, we really think it's time to pivot. And that is a pivot from managing the crisis to looking ahead to the bright spots that we're seeing more and more of, and really getting back to work and figuring out how best to do that, with the virus still in play. So this is really I think one of the first things you think about is, how do I reimagine my workplace, and how is it going to change, and what do I do to create a safe workplace? So I'm delighted to introduce my good friend and client, Steve Lang from Dancker, who's really become an expert in this area. Steve and his team at Dancker are experts in office interiors. That includes furniture and construction and technology. And so even before the COVID-19 crisis, the Dancker team was really knee-deep in these issues. That is showing office businesses, and in some healthcare businesses and others, how to imagine their workplaces, how to arrange themselves in their most productive fashion. Now we take those skills and we apply them to a completely new paradigm in which COVID-19, as well as all of the guidance we get from CDC and the NIH and others, and from the government agencies as well, tell us about how we're supposed to proceed from here on once our offices, reopen and once we get back to work. So this is really the first step, as I said, in the pivot plan. We want to share with you as much information as we can, and then answer questions at the end that you can put in the Q&A on the webinar. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is introduce Steve Lang. He can talk a little bit more about his work at Dancker, and then he's got a presentation that he'll share from his desk. Good afternoon, Steve. Steve, if you're speaking, I think you may still be on mute at this point. Steve, well, we may have a little bit of a technical difficulty. I'm gonna apologize to everyone on the line. Steve, what I'm going to do in just a moment, I don't think I can figure out how to unmute your line. So what I'm going to do, Steve, is just send you a new link that you can join. You can join again as a presenter. If everyone on the line could just bear with us for just a minute. Okay, Steve, you should have a link that's in your inbox now. And thanks for everybody's patience. As you can tell, we're a law firm, by the way, so we're not exactly a professional webinar company. So still making a couple of mistakes here and there as we go. So thanks for your patience. It'll give me just a chance to give you a 30-second description about what we do at Santa Massimo Davis as Steve gets connected. So our firm is really a boutique law firm based in Parsippany, New Jersey, with offices in New York and Philadelphia. And we spend our time as the outside general counsel for mid-market companies like Dancker that are companies in the mid-market space that aren't large enough to have their own in-house legal teams. What we do through fixed fee arrangements and project-based arrangements is to create a situation in which our law firm is the equivalent of an outsourced law department, handling basically soup to nuts of the legal issues and regulatory issues that that mid-market companies face. So it's really in the course of that work in counseling mid-market companies about, not only the personnel and real estate issues that you face from a legal perspective, but also what do you need to think about as you manage your employees in this new paradigm, this new COVID-19 paradigm. And what we find is that it's interesting to talk about all of the legal issues that come up, but what we think is that what you need are experts like the folks at Dancker to tell you what you need from a logistics perspective. How do you arrange the interiors of your office or in your manufacturing or healthcare environments to make it as safe as possible and comply with all of the guidelines. So Steve tells me he's still having a little bit of trouble getting in. I just resent the link to you, Steve, so hopefully that'll work in just a minute. Steve, if you're having trouble with that link that I tried to send you, actually I found how we can let you talk. So if you want to log in through the old way, the original way that you logged in, I think I figured out how to let you talk now. Hey, Steve Lang, if you could just, if you can log back in the way that you originally did a few moments ago, I think we can figure out how to make you, how to let you talk now. Again, thanks for your patience, everyone, as we work through these issues.
So Chris, can you hear me now?
I sure can. There we go.
Awesome. Okay, so let me share my screen. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay.
You're at
you see my whole screen?
Mistakes on each of these webinars, so thanks for everybody's patience.
Chris, you can hear me and see the screen?
Sure can. Yep.
Okay. Hey, good morning, everybody. Sorry about that little technical difficulty. As many of you, we are all dealing with questions of uncertainty, and it's changing weekly, if not daily. We have hosted a series of meetings with our corporate clients, and we're doing that to share ideas and gain insights and information about what the office will look like post-pandemic or as we navigate back through this pandemic. And our clients are made up of really smart, innovative Fortune 500 companies. And I'm going to do my best today to share some of that research and insights with you and give you a little bit of a taste of, at least at this point, what we're seeing about what will change and what are the accommodations that we as organizations will need to make. So just by way of further introduction, Chris mentioned earlier, we're an integrated interiors firm focusing on these 4 areas. So architectural solutions, commercial interior furniture, audiovisual solutions, and all of the services that go with those things, including all of the moves, adds, and changes that happen in an office environment. We've been in business since 1829, so Chris mentioned pivot earlier, and we've done our fair share of pivoting since 1829, and we've evolved quite a bit. Most of our clients are facilities, corporate engineers for the facility itself, folks in HR, or corporate real estate executives. That's primarily who we manage, the folks that we help. And we do the specification, the design, the space planning, the project management, and everything else in between. So as Chris mentioned on the onset, this has been a very troubling and challenging time for everybody. Those that have figured out how to work from home, or those that have been working from home prior, have been perhaps in a little bit of an advantage. Those that have scrambled to figure out how to work remotely by now have probably caught up. But we live in this space every day, and when you cut through the noise, the guidance and the direction right now is one of, I'll call it a panic. And I appreciate that most people are panicking, and it is an anxious environment right now. And hopefully through the talk today can give you just a little bit of perspective on what's happening and what we need to think about. So we've adopted some of our thinking around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you took a course on marketing or human behavior or know anything about Maslow, the needs are additive. And if you don't meet the basic needs, you can't move up the ladder or to the top of this triangle in this illustration. And so up until this crisis, most organizations were spending time at the top of the pyramid. They were working on the accomplishments of the organization, what different business units were doing, and products that were being launched, services that were being met. Ultimately, the best organizations achieved their aspirational goals, what they wanted to be, how they were reinventing themselves or reinventing their businesses. And that was really good work. And as Maslow would say, that was at the highest level of transformational need. The problem is when this crisis hit, it is forcing all of us to solve for and deal with the very basic human needs at the bottom of this pyramid. And so as business leaders and organizations, if we don't solve for the very basic needs of people's personal health and their wellness and their feeling of safety and security, the rest of the work in the office can't get done. It can't get done remotely either if we don't solve for that. And right now, the way we're solving for it is that we're distancing. And again, as I said earlier, those with the technology capability are able to manage their business right now, and people are able to get work done if you're not in a critical unit or a manufacturing environment where work actually still has to get done in person. So I use this because I think it never has been more profound that if we don't solve for these needs, we won't get back to the good work. And so how do we and what do organizations need to think about in rethinking the workplace through that lens? So a little bit of a framework for this. If we think about it in the now, the near, and the far. Now is, immediately, what are the things we need to do? We're probably in, just in terms of forward planning, and I would use our clients as a guide. And so while I don't know everyone on this call, as a general rule of thumb in our client base, on the now subject, they're in week 3 or 4 of they've engaged a SWAT team, they have a back to work group, they've assimilated some of the ideas, they've established some protocols. They don't have all the answers, but they do have a now plan. So some of our talk today will focus on that now plan. And if there's some Q&A at the end and you want more insights on that, I'd be happy to do that. But it's very specific, it's very cultural driven, it's very organizational driven. And so there isn't one right answer. The best answer is that you get yourself, if you haven't already, on a team to think through that. But next, as we think about the near and the far, I think about through the lens of space. How do we retrofit immediately? how do we reconfigure? What about the space needs to change in the near term? And I would define the near term as the next 6 months to, let's say, 2 years. And then a little further out, what is the need for an office, and how will the office reinvent itself? And how will we, as one of the folks that spend our time there, help to reinvent that? So very much in the now. Obviously, there are some pretty extreme social distancing solutions. A lot of good guidance from the CDC. If you haven't been on their website relative to the office environment, you should check it out. They actually give a lot of good feedback on what needs to happen. And as I said a moment ago, many of our clients are on teams and are thinking through the very basic things like, what do we do? Do we screen people in on the front entrance? Do we close down all the entrances so everyone enters into one entrance? We had a client tell us they have commercial real estate space in Manhattan and they're on one of the higher floors in the building. And they did a quick study. The average wait time for one of their employees to get back to work on the floor, once there is a back to work order in Manhattan, which will be quite some time, could be 75 to 95 minutes, because the elevator with the new social distancing platform will be significantly less occupied. And so you think about that and the profound change, not to mention the public transportation that someone may need to take on the way into the city. There's a lot that's going to change. So screening stations, screens and dividers, things to divide the average person from the next person in terms of, cough and air and the air particles. Technology solutions to manage the remote workforce. If we're working from home today, we're on a Zoom platform, and there's several platforms to do that. But what does the built environment have to support that technology from those that will continue to work from home for quite some time? And then a lot of logistical services, including things like wayfinding and signage and messaging, to sort of herd the cats, if you will, in the office environment and give them a little bit of guidance about how they need to act in this new social distancing protocol. So a little bit of design consideration. This is a pretty busy slide, but you can take a read along with me. There's some minimum distancing requirements. We talk about open space versus own space, reorienting the furniture, that is the geometry of, do people face each other or not? How do we separate space? Are there things that are adjustable by the employee? Can they move their screen? Can they do something themselves? A lot of our clients have said, in this kind of tactical way, we're giving all of our employees their share of PPE and cleaning supplies, so that in addition to us doing the proper cleaning, they can do their own cleaning, because it's not only the fact that the building is clean, but it's the perception that I believe as an employee that my area and the building is clean. And if I can do it myself, it makes me feel a little better. It makes me feel a little safer. And I go back to Maslow. If we don't solve for those needs, the productive work back in the office will cease to begin, let alone continue. So, a couple of just pictures and diagrams for you. There's many screens. There's all kinds of solutions. Our organization represents about 150 different manufacturers and a whole host of places in the commercial interior space. And many of them are talking to us about, what are the right solutions. And one of the things I would say in this regard is, if you buy early, you may buy often. And while there are a few things that you probably need to buy, and your facilities or office management staff are telling you, and those are good decisions, don't make any radical decisions too soon, because you're going to wind up changing your mind, or something is going to change about whether new information comes or new products emerge. You're going to wind up changing it. So, buy early, buy often, be cautious about that, would be a message there. Plenty of space and privacy. I've given you a couple of photos here just to share. We have glass screens on top of the partitions. We have sort of these division of space things, and panels that you can put in space to just divide and give people a sense of privacy, but also the air that they breathe, and some distance or screen or barrier amongst the air that they breathe. I can't speak to the HVAC systems in buildings and in restaurants. I know we've all heard a lot about that. If you read anything, that is of major concern, because the way the air flows in a building, if this contagion can be captured in the air and moved across a further distance than 6 feet. I'm not an expert in that, but I will tell you it is of concern to some of our corporate clients. So through the lens of furniture, and these are just examples of, there are mobile screens and there are even cardboard screens that one of our partners have developed that are kind of disposable. So you can just sort of put them in place and then move them around as needed. And, a lot of our clients have gone to this kind of open hot desking or benching system. That's creating a bit of a problem in this environment. So how do we create the social distancing requirements within the benching world? And that is problematic. One of the ways clients are doing that, quite frankly, is not everyone's coming back at the same time. And that's easier than modifying the furniture, quite frankly. It's just, we've got an empty chair next to every person. So our protocol is going to be, we're going to slowly migrate back. And that seems to be quite the norm. Again, just some more examples of screens and things that will change. I don't believe, this is an editorial, I don't believe we're going back to the cubicles of the 70s and 80s, but I do believe there's going to be a little bit more division of space. We'll talk about the future of an office sort of later in the presentation, and why in fact we may even need an office in the future. I'll give you at least some insights from our clients there. A few other quick examples. I mentioned earlier about wayfinding and visual communication. Now more than ever, the floors, the vertical surfaces, the walls can provide the right clues and help herd the cats in the office environment. When you're talking to the folks in HR, again, solving for these needs is communicating to the employees and training them on how we now are different in the way we act and move throughout the office. The 6-foot office has become sort of quite an interesting subject, and I think you're going to hear more about that in line with the distancing protocols. So some very simple reconfiguration principles, if you're so inclined, or you have the ability to move things around, things like the density I just talked about, division of space, but geometry is really important. Who faces who and why, and can we augment that a little bit? Here's a good example, maybe in a benching system where those two workers may prior have been facing each other and therefore breathing at each other in a very kind of close confined world. And while they don't work at their desk all day in this kind of knowledge worker environment, just that simple geometric move allows them, if only for perception and some level of air you breathe, it's directionally important. Very busy slide here, but enough to say that there are a lot of things you can do if you step back and look at your entire floor plan. I won't read all these to you, but clients have said to us in the cafeteria or cafe spaces, taking chairs away, eliminating those places where people can, socially convene for now, the water cooler. We need to prevent people from doing that. And we need to be very intentional about our ability to prevent people, whether it's screens or just removing chairs in a conference room. For right now, we have to be and take special precaution. I think you're going to see a lot of new products enter the work environment. Simple thing like a motion sensor for lights. We have those in our homes, and certainly they've made their way into the corporate offices. But there'll be a lot of other things where you wave your hand and it's touchless, and your coffee will brew, and you may be able to do things that don't require a physical touch. And that's why I say, buy early, buy often. So just be a little cautious of the things that seem like good examples or good solutions. There are some right now. There will certainly be others in the coming weeks and months. When I think about collaborative spaces, one of the big trends in the office prior to this crisis was the office became more of a place to collaborate. The cubicle was dead, and we had people working in an open plan, and we had various settings. There was a residential feel in the most optimized offices, in the most sophisticated corporate offices, let's say in our region, frankly around the country, but in the regions we serve, we saw a big trend. And now we're trying to help clients rethink that a bit. So, in the image to the top left here, there still is a collaborative space, but we've enclosed it and we've made the 2 seats, rather 4 seats, but back to 2 seats, and they're 6 feet apart. So can you still collaborate in the open environment? Kind of. Do you need to take a different view of protocol? Yes. Again, some of the top right here, just some individual space where you may go to get some respite or read or move away from your work area, but a single unit as opposed to a group of units together. I think technology is going to be a major differentiator for the companies that are continuing to do good work. Platforms like Zoom and Microsoft Teams are only as good as the environment that they're designed to work in. So clearly, from a home office perspective, if you're a progressive company, you're on a platform and you're doing a good job of your work with the knowledge workers in your office, and it's good enough for now. The question becomes, back in the built environment, once, even if there's a portion of your workforce that begins to migrate back to the office, is the built environment structured in a way, designed in a way, that it will accommodate all of those continued Zoom calls from the remote workforce that may be in existence for quite some time? So is the space ready to have Zoom calls throughout the day in an open environment, for example? Are we going to overhear conversations of people staring at their screen, talking to those that are remote? And does the space accommodate them moving into a private space, perhaps a very smaller private space, because they wouldn't take up a big conference room, or that big conference room that was set for 12 is now being used with 5 and there's nowhere to go. So if we want to do our best work and continue to collaborate using technology, some of the built environment needs to think about how it accommodates for that video conferencing that will continue as this pandemic kind of digests itself and slows down a bit. So here's just some other examples of different settings. It's not only the technology itself, but it's the setting around the technology that helps the technology be more utilized, more leveraged, and more effective. We're seeing things like, prior to this crisis and certainly after this crisis, room scheduling applications. So no longer do you have to go up to a room and ask, but there's a scheduling application. You can touch your phone and not the actual room to schedule a room. You can go up to the room and see if it's being reserved. Some mobile technology to move that video conference into a private space. That literally in the top left photo there is a Zoom board that moves around, is on wheels, and has battery attached to it, and you can have a 3 or 4 hour Zoom call anywhere in the building, and all you need is the space and a Wi-Fi. Visual managing of the space and the floor. Some of our big corporate clients that use significant corporate real estate are looking at things like maps and other devices to allow them to manage their floor plate in a much simpler way, and to do some wayfinding and guide people on what's open and what's not open. When I think about technology, I also think about this sort of higher level hotspots. And so some of our, again, large corporate clients have sensors that sense activity within the space, and it talks about where the space is and how people are moving throughout the space, and will report back where people are convening and where those hotspots are. And through the lens of a social distancing guideline, this will be very helpful for corporate real estate executives as they think through the space and reconfigure space to accommodate some of those hotspots. So through the lens of emerging trends, what do we see kind of coming down the road a bit? 3 categories. Acceleration of the change that's already happening and that we're all experiencing. Changes caused by fear and that immediate crisis. So, what if this happens again? And what do we do as a result of that? So the first 2 are kind of fear-based or response-based. And the third one is, what can we take out of this? How do we create an opportunity out of the crisis to change the built environment in a way that not only supports another pandemic, should it come, God forbid, but also gives a better outlook to how the space is being used overall? And I'd like to focus in 4 areas there. How do we spend time? Can we spend time? And what about well-being? What does that mean? And how is it different now? Some of the changes to the built environment that I started to allude to, digital transformation. One quick example was the idea of Zoom and other platforms and how that will be effective in the built environment. And then organizationally, how do we get back to doing our best work? And what will the office be so that we are enabling our best work in the future? So on the subject of well-being, the home office, depending on what you have and what you're used to, can be a blessing or a curse. Some people are set up in a home office. Some people have the ability to have the technology and the ergonomic tools and the workplace to do that. And quite frankly, some are crimped into a closet trying to do their best work with not so good resources. So this is a focus, I think, and many corporations are starting to talk about, do we need a home office policy? Do we need a home office standard? And when I say policy, the policy includes how often and who, but also what do we give them, if anything? Do we supply them with the right materials, the technology, an ergonomic chair, perhaps, some semblance of a table, a place to do their work, and it's going to be very dependent on the individual. So, as you can imagine, this is a trend that I don't think, and our clients are saying, is not going to go away. When I think about wellness, I think about safety concerns, and what is important now is that we communicate early and often. And one of our clients said to us, which was really interesting, she said, you need to adapt, adjust, and announce. And so just because we have developed our strategy and we're on the SWAT team for the back to work, when we get people back in that second and third wave, it's going to create a whole bunch of new challenges that we haven't really thought about. So are we agile enough to adjust those things and accommodate some of the new concerns that have arisen from people coming back? And if you have a plan A, you need a plan B all the way to plan Z. What is important right now beyond safety is the health and wellness. So if I'm safe, do I feel healthy, and am I provided an environment where I can still do the best work that you need me to do? Because if not, I'm just going to stay home. It's safer here. So the built environment. Really, if you think about it, and this is sort of an overgeneralization, there are 5 different work modes that happen in an environment for work. And focusing is your private time. If you're lucky, you have a private office, but you can do that anywhere as long as you have privacy and focus. You'll see some of the millennials wearing their ear pods or headphones to do that focused work. Socialization in the office is important. Human beings are social creatures. We help each other do good work by socializing and synthesizing ideas with and through each other. The learning environment, most corporations have a space where they do training or learning remotely and in the built environment. Collaboration, a little different than socializing. We're here to solve a problem. We're getting down to business, but I need your ideas and you need my ideas, and together we need to come up with the best ideas. And then rejuvenation, can I take a break? Can I get something to eat or drink? And, can I recharge and, read a magazine or catch up on an article that I wanted to catch up on while at work? So we're starting to think about reimagining the office of the future as a destination, kind of like a club. You have access to the club if you're an employee, and what's at the club? At the club could be a whole bunch of things, but it's a destination where, in an organization where people want to do their best work, they have an environment where they can do that, and that is inviting and is a place where, when work needs to get done, they have the teleconferencing capabilities, the conferencing capabilities, the food service capabilities, the rooms, the reservation systems, and all the accoutrements in an office where the best work gets done. And so it may not be a place, the office, that you have to live in every single day, 5 days a week. But when you go there, it's a place where you get your best work done. It's a place that people want to go to. So thinking about transformation, there are so many things that are going to be put into the built environment to help organizations think, use, utilize, and manage their real estate in new and different ways. So we are on the forefront of this. We represent about 15 or 20 audiovisual manufacturers, and some of the really interesting things that are starting to come together with holograms and 3D imaging and seeing people in a new environment, even if they are in a social distance way or working remotely. Those things, those projects, those technologies are going to get fast forwarded, and you're going to see those come a lot sooner than they may otherwise have, because organizations and people within them still need to do their best work. I think of this like I think of a basketball team. Could a basketball team play basketball with average sneakers, with a dirt basketball court, and with 2 nets on each side of the court? They certainly could play basketball. The best teams, the best organizations, if they want to do their best work, and in this lens of basketball, they want the best sneakers, they want the best uniforms, they want the best court, they want the best technology to put them in a place to optimize their game and their ability to play at the highest level. And our corporations, and that's not everybody, but the corporations in the Northeast and around the country that we support are in a competitive environment like many of you. And I believe that space, the physical environment, although we may be using less of it, will be a tool, can be an asset to allow them to optimize their work, to do their best work in the groups and within the infrastructure that they operate in. So when I think about that transformation, I said earlier, humans are social creatures, but it starts with establishing a clear vision on what is the office and what it needs to look like post-COVID and in the future. Are there enough people to manage the change leadership? Do we have executives that believe in this vision and see the opportunity to do our best work? Have we designed the organization for change? One of the things that I think is really important about the built environment is it needs to adapt and change almost on a dime. So we're seeing a lot more flexibility in the built space pre-COVID, and I think you'll see a lot more flexibility post-COVID. Movable architecture, change out functioning technology, movable personal equipment, furniture, chairs. People want the ability to augment their own space to do their best work and then return it to where it was. Do we have an agile environment? Have we had, or do we implement a change management process? And then ultimately, do we have all the state-of-the-art tools available to us to do our best work? So that ends my formal discussion. I hope everyone continues to stay safe, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Chris, I'm going to stop my share now.
Great. You know, Steve, that was amazing. Thank you so much for that insightful presentation. The first question I have is, you know, the technology. I think that consumers of technology are sometimes a bit nervous that, you know, what I buy today is not going to be, you know, standard in 9 months or even less in some cases. So if you think about investing in technology in the workplace, what do you think a useful lifespan would be for that technology?
Sure, that's a really good question. So first of all, the price of some of these devices and platforms like Zoom, as an example, have come down dramatically. And as the adoption broadens, the price will continue to come down. But my window is 5 years is too long, but 3 to 5 years.
Right.
3 to 5 years. And you don't have to spend a fortune to get good technology. You know, in this case, I would say, don't let great technology be the enemy of good. In this case, if you have the technology and it's functioning, it's better than no technology, or it's better than old technology. So, you know, you can be a forward thinker, but not too forward, I think, is the message.
Right. You know, and in terms of hygiene, you know, we've spent a lot of time with clients over the last few weeks thinking about the CDC guidelines, for example, in terms of sanitizing your space and upgrading your hygiene practices. You know, in terms of the type of furniture that we see today, would you think that that furniture lends itself to, making sure that it's wiped down and cleaned more often than, some of the traditional furniture that you might see in a professional office?
So surface materials become really, really important. The healthcare environment has guidelines for antimicrobial materials and certain bleachable fabrics that you'll find all throughout their buildings. And I think we can take some learnings from the healthcare environment. I don't think that the office needs to be as sterile as the healthcare environment, but when you think about surface materials, Chris, things like antimicrobial surfaces and wood veneer is not so applicable to cleaning agents as a plastic laminate, for example. And the plastic laminate can look very much like a wood surface, but the cleanability and the reusability of it is significantly different. So you can have the look of wood without the performance of wood in a cleaning environment that would perform significantly worse than a plastic laminate, for example.
One thing I think is interesting in the slides that you put up, Steve, were the various environments where people were collaborating, and all the different options that are available. Have you seen already, or will you expect to see a focus on the ability of the customers to reconfigure on the fly with their furniture? To buy furniture products that you can move around and change a couple of times a day in some cases?
Yeah, so that was a trend pre-COVID, and I think through the lens of this pandemic will continue to be a trend post-COVID. The only difference is that the materials by which those are built will be more cleanable in nature, right? So if I had a fabric covered screen on wheels, I may now have a whiteboard on wheels or a glass board on wheels, because it's just more cleanable. It doesn't carry potentially as much of the germ or the disease. I'm not a chemist or a microbiologist, but it's easier to clean those things. And so the mobility of the products within the space and the individuals need to move them around, that trend has been and will continue because it gives the user, the individual, control over their environment. And when you have knowledge workers coming out of the cube of the 70s and 80s, that's really what your people want to do their best work.
Mm-hmm. One area that comes up in a lot of our discussions are the kitchens. The common areas within a typical office space where people get their coffee and put their lunch in the refrigerator or toast their a bagel in the morning. Any thoughts around how you can, aside from staggering work schedules and keeping people out of the space, but any thoughts for how you kind of manage that space other than to limit the number of people that go into it at any given time?
Yeah, I worry about those hot spots, the cafes, cafeterias, bathrooms. Think about a relatively newly built airport. When you go to use the bathroom in the airport, usually the newly built spaces don't have doors, right? They have a way that you kind of snake around a wall and you find yourself in the bathroom. That's intentional because, the amount of people that will touch a door in an airport could be, hundreds of thousands. And so I think that thinking in the office will evolve to the work cafe, the cafeteria, the bathrooms, those kind of hot spots, the entranceways. Chris, it's a little too soon to share the products that will be in those spaces, but it's absolutely not too soon to say that our clients effectively are roping those spaces off in the near term. If they had a cafeteria and there were a bunch of tables with 4 chairs, there's now a bunch of tables with 1 chair, and they've probably taken a few tables out. They've put in a lot of PPP, kind of mobile carts that have their own equipment. So in every area where you'd find, let's say, a coffee station, you're also going to find a cleaning station, so that you feel that once you've touched something, you can wipe it down. Once you've used the sink, you can go back and clean it. So it's going to be a different world for quite some time. And again, it's the perception of clean in addition to the actual clean. So one of the other things, Chris, in light of that question, excuse me, is a lot of clients have said to us, we have increased the level of cleaning during the business day. And as they envision people coming back in waves, they want their folks to see the cleaning happening and to have additional day porters. A few clients have called them, where the big corporate clients are in the space and their people are occupying the space. And kind of like when you go to a really nice bar or restaurant and there's a guy or gal in the bathroom that's going to help you a bit and wipe your hands and give you a towelette. You may find that in work cafes throughout corporate America, where someone's there to kind of help and clean and follow up and make sure that you feel comfortable. And that would be money well spent for a bigger corporation that values its people and understands that when those basic human needs are met, the better work can start to happen.
Yeah, I hear you. When you talk about a bigger company and possibly having a valet, that helps you keep the space clean. When you start to get down into the mid cap and smaller cap clients, I feel like the individual company is going to be responsible to sort of help itself in a way, and that individual employees, I think, share some of that burden. You talked about
no doubt, and that's a really good takeaway. It's easy for me to talk about what clients that have close to unlimited budgets can do. But yeah, when you get down to the middle market clients, it's going to be driven by the employees and through the employees, and you're going to have to empower them to do some of it yourselves or themselves. The other thing is, most of those mid-market clients are in multi-tenant buildings, and so you really need to lean on your landlord or the building management company to provide you some guidance and some support, and to install the new protocol, and to make sure that the others that share your building are adhering to the protocol. And that in and of itself is a challenge, because different companies and cultures think and act differently. And so in a multi-tenant building, it's a whole nother level of challenge that some of your clients and our clients are dealing with.
Mm-hmm. One last thing I was thinking about, and one of the slides that you showed earlier sort of triggered it. It was a collaborative environment in one of those sort of industrial looking spaces, if you will, with the polished concrete and the open ceiling. It led me to wonder whether we would start to see, different preferences when it came to build outs and construction. That open ceiling concept looks really cool in certain environments, but you asked the question about how can you clean it, and how can you keep the open ceiling, sort of in a more hygienic state than you might have had to worry about before the crisis.
Yeah. Couple things. I've heard a lot about HVAC systems. I was on a call recently, and you may have something, Chris, lined up within your client base. There's a lot of good work being done there to accommodate better airflow, cleaner air, kind of out of my purview and knowledge. But I will say, in terms of the built environment, more hard surfaces, because they're easily cleanable. I don't know about that full open plenum ceiling, because there is a lot of places for dust to just gather, and therefore pathogens and stuff. But with the hard surface comes this other problem. If you've ever been in a restaurant where it's all hard surfaces, the restaurant's just really noisy when it's filled with people. Well, pre-COVID, when it's filled with people. A simple thing like sound masking, white noise, we've installed tons of that. It's like $1 a foot. It's not expensive. And these little speakers that hang from the ceiling that provide, a little bit of privacy, audio privacy from, 3, 5, 6 feet away. You no longer can hear those people talking, because there's a natural white noise throughout the space. So as surfaces become more cleanable and harder, white noise will become even more prevalent.
Well, Steve, this is a great discussion, really informative for sure, and I appreciate all the insight that you provided today. For those on the phone, thank you very much for not only participating but also having some patience through our little technical difficulties. So sorry about that, but thank you for staying on. I'd invite you to reach out to Steve individually with your issues and problems. He's done a great job for a number of our clients, and as you can see from today's presentation, a lot of great insights. So thank you very much for attending, and keep your eyes open for invitations for other upcoming seminars on our Pivot Plan series. So thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.